discuss. So this was a protocol I developed in the last year, basically with 2 NYU PhD students and a Cornell student, while I teach at NYU and also work with the A16Z crypto research group. So we've been looking at randomness beacons for a while, which is independent of crypto, cryptocurrency Web3. This has been something people have thought about since the 80s, really, where I guess initially a randomness beacon was kind of an ideal thing, like a random oracle that is something that you can't really achieve, like a perfect service just outputs randomness everybody can sample. And then, if you want to have a public lottery, you just agree we're going to sample the randomness beacon, tomorrow at a certain time, and that will determine the winner. Usually I talk about the NBA draft lottery when I'm talking about these kind of public lotteries, which happened last night. And of course, everybody thought it was fixed as usual. No matter what the outcome is, everybody always thinks it's fixed. So anyway, so for applications like that, pre-blockchain, people have been thinking about this for a while. And we have a bunch of approximations for how you can build a randomness beacon, since it doesn't really exist. The simple ones are kind of just like trust NIST to do it or trust some organization, which isn't very satisfying. And there's some attempts to build them out of things like stock market data that have never really had a good security model. So that's actually a separate thing I'm working on with students, trying to actually figure out what security that gives you. But instead, usually we want to design some multi-party cryptographic protocol where we make some assumption about the participants, and then we can prove some guarantees about getting a random output. So like I said, replacing ping pong balls for state lotteries would be kind of the classic application. There's a bunch of other security applications, and of course in the cryptocurrency space, all sorts of gambling, like gaming applications that you'd want trusted randomness, plus sampling committees for consensus protocols. So it's a pretty integral part. The Ethereum 2.0 builds in this idea of a beacon chain, which is used to select which stakers are going to form a committee and in which epoch, and a lot of other consensus protocols work the same way. So it turns out there's actually a more formal argument that randomness is kind of fundamental to having an efficient consensus protocol. Basically, the argument is either you need everybody to broadcast information in every round, which doesn't really scale if you have tens of thousands of people staking in some proof of stake protocol, or you actually need a secure random sampling of who's on a committee in which round. And you can kind of prove that that problem is like, essentially like you have to build a randomness beacon to have that consensus protocol with that property. So that's kind of why we're interested in it. I'm not sure what everybody's background is, so you can tell me if like the classic way to do it I can skip if people know how commit reveal works, or I'm happy to go into the detail.
Yeah, we could probably skip, I think.
Skip, yeah, okay. Great. So commit reveal. I guess people have seen, and it has this kind of fundamental problem that the last person to reveal can abort and bias the output. So there's basically two branches from there. Actually, the same student, Kevin, who developed this protocol, we've been working on this like grand kind of systematization of all randomness beacon protocols, and we have a flow chart for which DRB protocol you should use for which application. And the first branch in the flow chart is basically, do you have an honest majority or not? So if you have an honest majority, if you're willing to make some honest majority assumption, there's a whole bunch of protocols that kind of fix the last revealer problem by sharing extra information so that a majority of the participants can recover from a minority that don't finish the protocol. So that's like a big line of work in the honest majority model. If you don't want to make an honest majority assumption, the only way we really know how to make the dishonest majority model work is with time-based crypto, which is something I've worked on for a while with VDFs and other things. But I think the first kind of, I think people informally knew how to do this, but the first formal proposal was 2015 with this unicorn protocol. So again, I'm not sure if people have seen this before, if they're familiar. But I should probably just, it's so simple. Literally everybody in the protocol just publishes a random value. You combine everybody's random value, which can just be hashing them all together. And then you run the result through a delay function. So it's like a one-round protocol. There's no commit reveal. It's just a publish and compute, which seems kind of impossible, I guess, that something that simple can work. But the reason is that if this delay function is supposed to have the property that nobody can compute it nobody can compute it quickly. And assuming that it's really slow for everybody to compute, nobody can choose their R value strategically because they can't evaluate the delay function fast enough to know what impact their value will have. The only thing you can do is select randomly, which guarantees the output will be randomized. But you can't do anything smarter than that unless you can compute the delay function quickly, which usually there's some cryptographic assumption that you can't do that. So it's a really elegant idea and design. In 2015, actually, when they published it, VDFs didn't exist yet. So they had delay functions that didn't have very fast verification. It's still a good protocol, actually. It's just not that efficient to verify the result. You have to, without VDFs, you have to recompute the delay function to verify the result. But I guess this partially motivated creating VDFs.
Sorry, so you couldn't,
yeah,
you couldn't verify any quicker than just naive reexecution?
Yeah, recomputing.
Okay.
Yeah, you can build a delay function by just iterating a hash function, or iterating any one-way functions is easy, but that just doesn't have the verifiability part. But you can always verify by recomputation. Which is kind of what Solana does, actually. Interestingly, they do this proof of history thing, they call it, where they just iterate a hash function, and that has to be verified kind of manually. But
yeah, I've thought about that. I mean, it's a bit of a tangent, but that's a weird one to me, because VDFs do exist, yet I've also seen that Solana just do this verifier heavy thing of just hashing a bunch of times. Are there any advantages to that relative to using like a Pietrzak, Wozolowski?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've talked to them about it. So they two things. One, you can verify the repeated hashing in less total time, because you can parallelize it if you publish checkpoints, which is what they do. So you can break the chain up into K segments and verify them all in parallel. So it still requires, like, if the time delay is T, it still requires order T work, but the verification parallelizes, whereas the initial computation doesn't. So that's kind of one argument where they say it's not really that bad, is that you can parallelize it. Still potentially a lot of work, though. The only real advantages are, it doesn't, like, the cryptographic assumptions are safer, I think. You're not, there's some risk with the repeated squaring VDFs or other VDFs that people will discover some cryptographic shortcut to computing the function. That I think the repeated squaring assumptions are pretty likely to hold at this point, at least like as long as factoring is hard. You could also argue that there's always this question with delay functions of how much faster an adversary can go with hardware speedups. And I think there's a plausible argument that it's much harder to speed up hashing than speeding up like squaring in an RSA group. So maybe you have like a more reasonable bound on what the attacker is able to do. I'm not sure Solana's actually made that argument. I think that's the right argument for them to be making. But
yeah, the last one sounds like the most compelling one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's like just in terms of practical security, I think that's a reasonable argument. But I think they've made maybe a tangential version of that, where they just sort of say, we implemented the hashing thing, it was easy and it works, so we don't really see the pressing need to change.
Yeah,
I think they sort of said, like, if they thought the verification burden was too difficult, then maybe they would switch to something else, and they've been fine with it so far.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, great. So anyway, so that's the idea of this unicorn protocol, like delay function. You know, you can build a really simple randomness protocol with dishonest majority. The problem with this protocol is just that you have to, you still have to compute the delay for the, you know, the VDF gives you efficient verification, but somebody has to compute the delay function when the protocol runs. So you sort of rely on some honest party computing this, and it slows the protocol down. So this Bicorn protocol, I mean, this is kind of where the Bicorn name comes from. It's like unicorn, but there's two cases instead of just one. And in the optimistic case, if everybody behaves honestly, then nobody needs to compute a delay function. You get the result right away, and it's kind of equivalent to commit reveal. In the pessimistic case, you sort of fall back to it being exactly like unicorn, where one person has to compute the delay and then everybody else can do the efficient verification. So that's the goal of this Bicorn protocol. So the background tool is time commitments, which is another one I guess I'm not sure people have seen before, but it's a really useful tool, kind of related to delay functions in VDFs, but it's a commitment. You can commit to a value. You can open the value like a normal commitment efficiently, but other people, even without knowing your commitment secret, they can force the commitment opening by computing a delay function. So this is it's a really useful tool. You can use it for auctions and voting and lots of stuff where everybody commits to a secret value, and then if they drop out of the protocol, you can open their value, kind of even if they're totally disappeared. So this has been kind of an active area of research. Like there was this new scheme that came out in 2021, which is kind of much better than the classic scheme from 2000. And we were looking at this and said, like, it's really good. It's got this homomorphic property, which I'll kind of show you, like makes this a lot more efficient. The problem is that their scheme was not that efficient in kind of practical terms. And when we thought about implementing it in Solidity, we realized like it was never going to be feasible, you know, in gas costs. So we were looking, you know, for a way to make this more efficient. And we kind of had this insight that if you're building a randomness protocol, you don't actually need this general purpose time commitment scheme that allows you to commit to anything. So normally a time commitment scheme, you could commit to a vote, or you could commit to a bid in an auction, or a specific message that can then be open later. For a randomness protocol, the only thing you need to be able to do is commit to random values. And you don't even really care what you're committing to. If you can just generate a random commitment, that's totally fine. So we realized that you could use this sort of stripped down special purpose commitment scheme just for a DRB protocol that doesn't allow you to commit generally to messages, but just to random things. And that ended up making it much more efficient, so much that we could actually implement and run the thing, you know, on Ethereum. And it's actually like, it's efficient enough. This is like one of the few crypto talks where I think you can kind of get through the algebra in the talk, because it's very light. So think it's like a repeated squaring VDF. So we're working in a group of unknown order. You know, think like we're working mod n for a large n where the factorization is not known. Nobody knows the factorization. So there's this one-time setup where we compute the delay function on G. Essentially, we know we square G 2 times, and we just keep the value as H. So that happens once forever, and you know, like multiple parallel runs of the protocol can all use the same GH pair. So that's hopefully that cost isn't too bad. All right, then it kind of looks like a commit reveal protocol. So everybody who's participating in the protocol, they generate this random alpha value, and then they publish as a commitment G raised to the power of alpha sub I for, you know, participant I. So that's everybody's commitment in the first phase of the protocol. And then in the optimistic case, everybody just reveals their alpha value. That's kind of equivalent to revealing, you know, in a commit reveal protocol. And then the output is that you raise H to everybody's alpha value and just multiply all the results together. So that's the optimistic case. It looks a lot like commit reveal. It basically is commit reveal. We're just using kind of a special commitment, which is G raised to the power alpha. And then a little bit of a funny computation of the final result. Okay, so what happens if somebody drops out, or in fact, if everybody drops out? There's kind of only one pessimistic case, which is that between 1 and n parties have dropped out. So assume you don't know anybody's alpha values. You actually just multiply everybody's commitment values, right? So you multiply everybody's value G to the alpha sub I, and then you take that results and run it through the delay function. So also fairly simple. The trick is that you want to make sure that these cases give you the same result. So if the optimistic case and the pessimistic case had a different output, that would give participants some opportunity to bias the protocol, because they could sort of decide to drop out or not and force the protocol into one phase or the other. So a minimal requirement necessary but not sufficient for this to be secure is that the optimistic and the pessimistic case should always give you the same result. Okay, I thought that was going to be my next slide. Well, I guess I must have dropped the slide that has the algebra, but basically it's like fairly simple algebra. You can see that these are the same in all cases. So that's basically the protocol. Then I'll kind of show you some fixes that are extra fix that's necessary, but that's the basic protocol and how you get, like I said, optimistic case, very fast, no delay function, and the pessimistic case, just one delay function. So that's the other nice thing here, is that you multiply everybody's values together and then compute the delay function just once. So even if you have any number of participants, you don't have to compute the delay function many times in parallel. And you get the same result either way. So participants have no incentive to force the protocol into the pessimistic case. All right, so that's the basic flow of the protocol. It turns out this is like almost secure, but it's definitely not secure, because there's this malleability attack. So if you can look at everybody else's commitment value, you can kind of cook up a special value to publish last that cancels everybody else's value out. So you, if you're an attacker and you know everybody else's commitment and you get to go last, you multiply everybody's commitments together, take the inverse, and then set your commitment to be that, I guess, times some value that you've pre-computed the delay function for. And the idea is that if you publish this commitment value, you can kind of see in the pessimistic case, this will cancel everybody else's commitment value out, and just set the whole beacon output to be some pre-computed value. So unfortunately, this attack, if you don't fix it, kind of totally undermines security of the protocol. So the really simple, elegant version of this protocol isn't quite enough. But the paper goes through 3 different ways to fix it. And I'm happy to go through them all in more detail, or I can just kind of explain it at a high level first, maybe, and then people can say like which, if any, they want to see more detail on. The simplest way to fix it is you just have everybody publish proof that they know alpha. So notice if the attacker generates this this commitment in kind of a funny way, they won't know the discrete log of it to the base G. So they won't be able to do this zero knowledge proof. And you can just kind of exclude their value and know that it wasn't really generated in the normal way. So that's conceptually the easiest fix. It's very easy to reason about why that's secure. The security proof is pretty short. The problem is that it's the least efficient in practice, because everybody has to publish this zero knowledge proof. It's not too bad. It's just a proof of knowledge of a discrete log. although it's in a group of unknown orders, so it's like a little bit trickier. But it's not, I mean, I think I have a slide with like the numbers and solidity, but we've implemented it. I mean, this runs on top of Ethereum. It's not terrible. But there are 2 more efficient ways to do it. That was a lot more work for the students to prove that these were secure, but you know, they both are under sufficiently strong assumptions. So there's this pre-commitment idea to fix the protocol where you make it a 3-phase protocol. Everybody publishes a hash of their commitment and then their commitment and then opens the commitment, which seems a little bit like it's very simple, and it seems like, you know, seems like you're sort of just punting and like, why don't you need a pre-commitment? But it turns out just 1 round of pre-commitment is enough. You can prove that gets rid of the attack and the protocol is secure. So that's really simple and efficient. It just makes it a 3-round protocol, which isn't ideal. And then the most efficient way to do it is what we call the RX version, where everybody publishes, you hash everybody's commitment that they've published, and then that gives a unique exponent, a pseudo-random exponent, to everybody's committed value. So you're basically taking like a random linear combination of what everybody published, pseudo-random. And that way, like the attacker who goes last, you know, they can't cancel everybody's value out because they don't know, you know, well, they'd have to sort of grind over it, but they don't know what combination you're going to take, so they can't cancel everybody else's value out. So that's the most efficient, but sort of the most difficult to reason about, although we have a security proof for it. Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say I could, this is kind of up to you guys, like how much I can present these more. If they weren't clear, I could talk a little bit about some implementation stuff. Happy to answer questions about the 3 different approaches here.
Yeah, so for the third one, I mean, I get that you cannot control the exponent, but you could say as sort of in the malleability attack that it's okay, it's omega 0 to some power. And I mean, I don't know how much power that grants you. I mean, if omega 0 is a generator, not much at all.
But yeah, it's not going to be omega 0 to some power. Like it will be a totally different value. So here, so I switched to, if this helps. So you, okay, so can you see my mouse, by the way, what I'm pointing at? I'm not sure if that comes through the screen share, but yeah, so you hash everybody's committed value. And then you hash again to get a unique exponent for everybody's individual contribution. And then, in the optimistic case, it's easy. In the pessimistic case, maybe it's a little bit clearer. You take everybody's C value, you raise to this pseudo-random exponent, and that's where you get omega. So if you change, if say the attacker is like C sub 0, if they change their value, it doesn't, like if they raise their exponent, sorry, if they raise their commitment to some exponent, it doesn't raise omega to that exponent, little omega. It completely re-randomizes it because everybody gets a different B value, so you get a different combination. And the proof is tricky because you have to reason a lot about like the distribution and argue that it's indistinguishable from random, but yeah, that's kind of where the security comes from.
Okay, yeah, this makes sense. Thanks.
By the way, we thought this was pretty clever. And we were like, that we had this idea, and then after presenting it the first time, someone said, basically the same idea exists for BLS multi-signatures as a way to get rid of rogue key attacks, which is actually like very similar to, it's working in, a different setting and a different group, but they have the exact same issue that with BLS multi-signatures, if somebody can pick a rogue public key that they won't even know the private key for, they can kind of cancel out everybody else's key and forge a signature. And one of the fixes is almost exactly like this, where you generate a pseudo-random exponent for everybody's public key. So I guess in a way that made us feel like we weren't as creative as we thought we were, but it actually gave us more confidence that this is like a kind of a natural approach.
I was also curious.
Because you have published all of these 3 different approaches, but assuming that all 3 of them are, you know, secure, I would assume that why not just pick surely there's a clear winner here, which is the third one.
Yeah, so it's actually, it's not, I think, totally clearly. So I think if you want to do it on top of Ethereum and have a smart contract, you know, enforce the protocol rules and verify Rudy's contribution, which is probably the most sensible setting, then the ZK version is definitely the loser. I think if you're doing it, if you're running it like more as like a part of the consensus protocol, where you don't have to pay gas costs and everything, I think the ZK version is actually the best. It's the simplest, and the ZK proof, like on a real processor, like it's extremely fast. So that's what I would say is like the ZK is basically the winner, not on a smart contract, and definitely the loser on a smart contract. The pre-commitment one is actually more efficient if you're doing a lot of runs with the same people, because you can actually publish a Merkle tree of pre-commitments. So instead of making it a 3-round protocol, it's like 1 pre-commitment round for many future rounds. And then you just sort of open them as you go. So that's like the specific case where the pre-commitment protocol ends up being the winner. And then the kind of general open participation, like different people participate in every round, the RX version is the winner. So I do think there's actually like a scenario for each one, which is why we kept them all in the paper. There's another note too, which I'll add about this, which is this whole protocol. It's interesting because, you know, the power of it compared to most other DRBs is that it's dishonest majority. So you know, you only need 1 honest participant, which is really nice because you can run it on a smart contract and let anybody who's willing to pay the gas can participate, which is really powerful because then you can say like anybody should be able to trust the results of this DRB because they can participate themselves if they really want to. The problem is that if it's really open participation and you have a lot of participants, like in the, you know, hundreds or thousands, you might not be in the optimistic case very much. Like you might be hitting the pessimistic case all the time if there are enough participants, in which case at a certain point you should just do unicorn and say, like, assume we're in the pessimistic case every time. And you can simplify this a little bit, and, you know, you get rid of, well, all of it really. So it's a little bit of a funny thing where it's like, it's good for any number of participants, but really if there's too many, the benefit of having an optimistic case probably goes away, and you should just do the unicorn and have a pessimistic case every time. It's a little bit simpler.
Yeah, because also if you say, yeah, we can have max like 10 or 100 participants, then you could like Sybil attack that essentially.
Oh yeah, like if you set a hard cutoff on the number of participants.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you wouldn't really want to do that, I agree. But yeah, if you, I mean, I think what you would probably do in practice is like, you can still have a financial penalty for people who participate and force the pessimistic case. So you can see on chain who didn't open their commitment. And you could have like an arbitrary cost for that, to try to discourage people from participating and then not, you know, following through and forcing the pessimistic case. But again, at a certain point, like attackers might decide it's, you know, still worth it depending on what the penalty is.
Well,
And of course, there's
have the pool be kind of infinitely big, but then pick, you know, n people from that pool. and pick that at
Yeah, but
random.
no. But isn't that kind of circular? Because like, wouldn't you need a
Yeah.
randomness
I
beacon
was
to
just
pick
thinking,
Yeah.
the people? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a little tricky. I mean, the other thing you can do, which we talk about in the paper a little bit, is you can have kind of like a roll-up version where if it's like expensive to participate on chain, you can have a group of people come together and sort of publish one like secret shared value, and you can sort of prove that everybody's value was included, and then on chain it looks like one participant, but it can be sort of like an arbitrary number of off-chain people. And then you kind of have like standard concerns with roll-up servers, like you need a coordinator who could censor people. But I guess you could say like, if you're being censored by every pool that's available, then you could just participate on chain yourself. But that would be one way to kind of reduce the gas costs on chain.
Is there any way, do you think, to avoid this attack? Oh, well, not the attack, but I was thinking about with transaction ordering, for example, where if you can calculate the output in advance, it would give you a big advantage. Yeah, and you say there's basically no way of avoiding that situation, right?
Sorry, which situation?
Where if you have this optimistic pessimistic split, sorry, so you mentioned it, and just get the page.
Oh, in the paper?
Yeah, it's
Yeah. So I think you're probably referring to this notion that like if you have if you're in the pessimistic case because of one person, that person can actually compute the optimistic case privately. Yeah, that's like definitely another important caveat to the whole thing. And that's like, it's fundamental. You can't get rid of that problem in any kind of optimistic, pessimistic protocol. So all you can really do is punish that participant for not revealing. But then you're sort of relying on some economic security argument.
Yeah, I mean, then you're kind of folding back into some bonded
Randau style thing, yeah. Because you can kind of do like commit reveal punishment, or that's what the original Randau does. You just do like basic hash-based commit reveal, and then if people don't reveal, they sacrifice some, they get slashed, which is okay. But then you can always bias the thing if you're willing to pay enough. So this is like a weaker version of that because you still can't bias the result, but you can learn the result early, basically, if you're willing to pay the penalty of deviating from the protocol.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking in the context of like, say, some transaction ordering protocol. Even if you can't bias the result, just knowing, knowing the result, any sort of time advantage would give you a huge advantage.
Right.
Yeah, I guess you mentioned it with auctions as well. It's the same.
Yeah, you'd have to set it up so like I guess the way I think about it, if you were using this for transaction ordering, you'd have to have all the transactions committed before the end of the commit phase of the protocol. And then everybody has to wait around in the pessimistic case. And the attacker, like some attacker might learn the result early, but it will be too late for them to commit any more transactions that could do MEV. And then that kind of gets rid of the attack, but the cost, I guess, is basically whatever the length of the delay is. That's how long you've added that latency to everybody's transaction, which
kind
isn't great.
Making discrete block times in a way. I mean, submission times,
Which, I mean, you'll always have some like quanta of in any kind of like, shielded mempool approach, but this will probably make it a lot longer.
Yeah. But still probably preferable to like some just naive VDF approach.
Well, yeah, and there's an optimistic case, so yeah.
On that as well, Are there any ideas of ways of avoiding a trusted setup for the
Just kind of the standard, like you can use class groups. So there's like a unknown order group construction that doesn't have a trusted setup. So Chia uses that. I mean, it is a practical thing that's been deployed and used. Like Chia is fundamentally built around it, but like Ethereum didn't want to go down that road, and others, because the cryptographic assumptions behind it are much less kind of battle tested than RSA. So
Okay.
that's the main one. And you could drop that in here and do the whole thing with class groups and be okay. Otherwise, there is like an MPC protocol that can generate a RSA modulus with like a 1 out of n trust model. And I think they even scaled it to like a few thousand delegates. That's called Diogenes. It's a paper that came out in the last couple of years talking about how to do that, but still a trusted setup. It's just like a MPC.
I wonder about what this looks like implemented as a smart contract in practice. You just have whoever depends on the outputs would likely trigger it per epoch, or what does it look like, and how are the people rewarded, if at all?
Yeah, so I guess I don't know how the people are rewarded, especially because I know that you want them to have some penalty if they, don't open their commitment. I guess the second part of your question was like, who computes the delay function and publishes the result? Yeah, that's kind of also like you need some incentive model for someone to compute it. And there's been a little bit of thinking around that for VDFs in general. And there's some like paper on paid delegation of repeated squaring, where basically like if like after a certain cutoff, if you're in the pessimistic case, some other smart contract like kind of automatically notices that, computes the result, and publishes publishes like the long repeated squaring computation. You could also just like have an open market of people doing it off chain and reward the first person who publishes it. And there's been some work on watermarking these proofs so that you can't front run and try to steal the reward from someone who did the delay function.
But
that's pretty
fundamentally, it
unexplored.
seems like
it seems like
something that would work quite well as a protocol level implementation, where you could have like an app specific rollup dedicated to this. Or I was just thinking of the eigenlayer restaking, where that could potentially be used, and then the people who rely on the outputs somehow would have to pay for it. It's a bit difficult economically, I guess, but
yeah, I think that this argument has been made about randomness beacons in general, that they're a public good. Like it's very hard to charge people for using a randomness beacon. I mean, it's actually like the classic public good is a lighthouse, and a beacon is, basically a lighthouse. So I do think that that's kind of still the case. But yeah, if you build it in the consensus layer, I mean, consensus is also a public good, and so you sort